Welcome everyone for the panel discussion on interlinkages between Indian agriculture market reforms and food inflation. I'll start with a brief about the center. The Center for Transportation Logistics is an interdisciplinary center with the objective to facilitate cutting-edge research in transportation, logistics, and allied areas, and thereby contribute to knowledge, practice, and policy making nationally and internationally. We work on a lot of policy stuff, work with corporates, government, startups, and researchers. We have with us a very esteemed panelist and a moderator, Professor Poornima Varma of IIMA. She's an economist by training and works in the area of international trade and agriculture. She has a PhD in economics from the Center for Economic Studies and Planning of JNU, New Delhi. And she has been a recipient of US Fulbright Scholarship in 2016, and subsequently she was a visiting research scholar in the Department of Economics of University of Massachusetts, US. Currently, she is working as assistant professor at the Center for Management in Agriculture of Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. I hand over to Professor.
Thank you so much, Avi, for such a generous introduction. On behalf of the Center for Transportation and Logistics and IIM Ahmedabad, I extend a warm welcome to all the participants and the three panelists for today's session. We have a diverse panel of experts, experts coming from industry, experts from academia, policy making, and experts who are there on both the sides of academia and policy making. Let me take this opportunity to briefly introduce all the three panelists. We have Professor Munisamy Gopinath. He's a professor of agricultural marketing at the University of Georgia, Athens, with so many years of experience in the areas of agricultural markets, pricing, trade, and agricultural policies. We have Dr. Badri Narayanan from NITI Ayog. He's a lead advisor at NITI Ayog, and he heads the Trade and Commerce Division at NITI Ayog. He too has enormous experience in the areas of agricultural trade and policies, disruptive technology, energy, and public health policies. Then we have Mr. Kapil. He's the Chief Business Officer at National Commodity and Derivatives Exchange Limited. He has immense expertise in Indian commodity market, agribusiness, and changing dynamics of agricultural commodities trading. As we all know, Indian agriculture has undergone dramatic changes over the last couple of years, especially since late 1980s. There have been a series of reforms that is undertaken in the Indian agricultural sector to get rid of the market imperfection and to bring in greater efficiency, market competition, and farmers' welfare. Though there may be diverging views when it comes to the perspectives. I mean, how do you want the reforms to be taken place? I believe there is, unanimous agreement with respect to the need for reforms in the agricultural sector. Until 2006-07, the world prices, including agricultural prices in the Indian market, were very depressed. And from 2006-07 onward, the world prices began to increase. And as I have been reading one of the reports, IFPRI reports, they say that until 2006-07, the policy attention was on how to increase the world prices by kind of eliminating the trade distorting agricultural support policies, especially in the developed countries and developing countries. But then since 2007 and 8, when we began experiencing an increase in agricultural prices, the policy focus shifted away from how to increase the agricultural prices to how to reduce the agricultural prices so that it will not have an adverse impact on consumers and poverty. If you look at the Indian scenario in 1990s, when we embarked upon the agricultural reforms, one of the main arguments was we have to set the right prices for the farmers because the agricultural sector was heavily taxed. Many researchers criticized the Indian agricultural sector, saying that the enormous government intervention in the agricultural sector is working against the farmers from taking advantage of the market prices. So we know people like Dr. Ashok Gulati was in the forefront of such arguments, saying that Indian agricultural sector is heavily depressed and taxed due to the kind of government interventions that we are having. So the removal of government interventions would bring in a lot of changes and the prices would increase. And as a result, the farmers will be in a position to respond to the increase in market prices and produce more, sell more, and then as a result, greater agricultural growth. And then simultaneously, we also have seen the reforms in the APMC, Agricultural Produce Marketing Committee, had also taken place since 1990s with several model acts, one in 2003 and then another one in 2017. And then we had the latest, FAM Act, which the government had to eventually repeal due to the political pressure and farmers' protest. So, however, cutting it shortly, the whole point is uh, how we should head in terms of the agricultural market reforms in such a manner that the farmers will be greatly integrated to the market and they will be able to take advantage of the market changes and the market prices. And also, what should be the appropriate policy response, trade policy response amidst the rising food prices? Although the current reports shows that the food prices may ease out soon. I mean, the prices may come down. But at the same time, what should be the appropriate market reforms and the policies, the trade policy responses to take advantage of the increase in market prices. And let's look forward to an enriching session. And over to you, Professor Gopinath.
Good morning. Thank you, Poornima, for that great introduction and also kind of laying out the changes that have happened over the past 3 decades. I think we all globally are concerned about inflation. So that's where I would like to begin. Okay. We look at food price inflation, and we've had so many episodes of it in the past 2 decades in particular. The spikes of 2007 and 18, and there was another one in 2011, mid 2015, and again now in 2019 and 20. So the way I look at inflation is using a concept that USDA has developed, and it's really kind of easy to communicate. So I'm going to use that to kind of make my point. Okay, so allow me to share my screen. And if I speak in dollars, think of it as in terms of rupees. Okay, so essentially you're looking at a 100 rupee that you spend at the grocery store. In the case of US, it's about $1 that you spend at a store. Doesn't matter where it is. It's either at a grocery store, or at a kirana store, or at a restaurant, or at some other establishment. The ultimate product is food, okay? And how that food, at that $1 that you spend at the end point as a consumer, is broken down into pieces of who supplied that product to you, okay? If you look at it this point of view, then you can see where inflation creeps into the food sector. This is the US example. The most latest number they have is for 2020. And $1 spent at the consumer level becomes 8 cents. Essentially, 8 cents of that goes to the farmer. Okay. And everything else is captured by intermediaries, food processing, packaging, transportation, wholesale trade, retail trade, food services and other services and so on, okay? So in this particular context, you see the impact of market reforms along the whole chain. When I take, for example, the APMC reform, the Model Act that is to be adapted by all states and union territories to their particular context, okay, what are they targeting? They're targeting the number of players in the intermediation part, which is essentially the wholesale retail trade context, okay? And you can look at the Ministry of Food Processing and so on. They're looking at how we can package better, how we can process better, and so on. So any reform that you talk about in the context of food sector touches various components of this food dollar, okay? So I gave, as I was in IIM last month teaching our students there, I actually challenged them to come up with the food rupee, okay? And some of them did, and they had a 100 rupee note that they broke down into what goes to farmers versus what goes to packaging and other components in there, okay? So any reform along the supply chain from farmer to consumer is aimed at achieving efficiencies. If you achieve efficiency in wholesale, packaging, processing, and so on, it means that you're going to need fewer resources in that particular context, which means whatever consumer dollar that we have or consumer rupee we have, more of it goes to the farmer and other constituents. Okay, and that is the idea behind this concept of food rupee. Dr. Poornima Varma already talked about the various reforms, and before I kind of prejudge the speech of both Dr. Badri and Mr. Kapil, I just want to say there's so many reforms that have happened along the way, and including the ones that were proposed in the last 2-3 years and so on. So I would like to come back to the discussion after Dr. Badri and Mr. Kapil have had their introductory comments.
Yeah, sure. Mr. Kapil.
Thank you, Professor. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, being mostly on the output side of the market, I would like to, put a little more what Dr. Gopinath has added. India has remained a very price-sensitive country, right? And it has started, protecting consumer. Maybe up to 2012, 13, and 14, we started talking about protecting farmers all of a sudden, doubling their income, which is a very noble intent. And now again, in 2021, mid of 21, we started again talking consumer on a very serious note, and a lot of things has happened, which were not, supposed to happen if we go by the laws which government has proposed a year back. So, but the point is that how to create that balance. India, a country with huge population dependent on agri, most of the employment coming from the agri sector, definitely need a lot of attention. Though they need to be protected, income need to be protected, and simultaneously looking at the demography of the people, the parity and the economic condition. Food also need to be provided at the right price to the consumer. So I think that's the huge balance which we need to create, and we need a long-term policies to manage that. How to protect the farmer and how to protect the consumer. So when I talk about how government behave, right, in 2007-8, when we have seen the a serious situation on the food security, what government did, right, the stock limit were imposed abruptly over the night. Right, the export ban happened immediately. The futures trading were suspended in India, which was only 4 years old, right? And various other, right, releasing the stock from the government pool, importing by the government agencies. Now in 2021, I think we are doing the same thing, right? Nothing has changed in last 15 years. We are again doing the same kind of intervention. We are reducing the import duty. We have suspended the futures, 60% of Indian futures. We are exporting ban wheat. We all know what happened all of a sudden, and stock limits are in place. Interestingly, if you see, all these were part of agri reforms which were actually proposed by the government, right? Stock limit will not be there. Market will be free. People will be allowed, to hold the goods, to trade the goods freely out of mandi transaction. And when we do say all these things, there was an intent. So I will come to that. Second was, what we are seeing as a country, right? I think a lot of investments is happening in Indian market, but still, if we see, first of all, research is not a focus in comparison to global developed market. Research into agri is very less, maybe less than 1% of total agri budget. Second, I think we are putting a lot of money into agri, but for 3 reasons, I think we are focusing agri. First is increasing the production. So we just talk about input. Second is about protecting the farm income, which is MSP and related operations. And third is the marketing and infrastructure improvement. Fourth, which is being added, is the subsidies, which now we are not talking about, like the DBT. Now many of the states have started giving it. I think going forward, focus should be that the investment in agri should not be getting confused by the subsidies which we are giving, because for long-term improvement of whatever we want in agri will come with a sustainable investment approach. And what it will be, maybe during the discussion, we can put a lot more focus on that. And third, quickly, I will say the risk management. Prices will remain volatile. And when prices moved in a particular direction, it impacts one segment of the market, sometimes farmers, sometimes consumers. How to handle those situations without creating, so much disruption in the supply chain. I think that should be the focus for the government in long term, and that need to be studied much more deeply. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kapil Dev. Dr. Badri Narayanan.
Yeah, good evening, everyone, and good morning to Dr. Gopi. So I would like to focus on the trade policy aspects, because that's really what I know a little about. On the broader, price regulation or price stabilization, domestic market, reforms and so on, I'll leave it to the other panelists who are experts in that. So on the trade policy, many of you in the audience here might have seen the recent governing council of NITI Ayog that happened last week, last Sunday, in which the Honorable Prime Minister made a statement, which was widely covered, about the need for reducing our dependence on imports while increasing exports. So basically, we want to play a larger role in the global market. And this is across the board, not only agriculture, while developing domestic capacities. And that is the underlying spirit of Atmanirbhar Bharat, where we have enough scale, capacity, productivity to produce domestically, so that import dependence can come down on its own. So it's not like we have to raise import barriers or become more protectionist or something, but it is more like we have to become more competitive so that we can export a lot, and at the same time we can cater to the domestic market. And that capacity, if that can be done, that I think will also be a good way to contain prices. So if you are able to fix the supply side by all these positive steps to increase scale and productivity and quality, you can also contain the prices. So one more aspect here is that our ambition in the agriculture sector over the years has been to graduate out of exporting and producing primary food products to value addition, and getting into the post-harvest value addition from the crops and also the livestock sector. That has been broadly our ambition over time. And one thing that may be a dilemma for the policymaker and for the farmers and for the industry at large is that when you have such ambitions to export, obviously there is a tension between the global market and domestic market from a supply point of view. So you have a kind of limited supply, and you have competing demands in domestic market and external markets. So that is, in my personal opinion and assessment, I think it need not be a trade-off if we have sufficiently robust infrastructure, policies, capacity development in place. So in this, I agree with both Dr. Gopi and Mr. Kapil that a lot of initiatives have been taken in the past. Some of them have succeeded, some of them have failed. But the spirit or the ambition or the objective of the successive governments have been to develop that kind of a situation where the farmers don't have to face this trade-off, whether you export to the other markets globally, or you add value and keep it in the domestic market, or add value and then export. So these should be options that the farmers can have, the producers can have, the industries can have. But unfortunately, that is at the moment that remains like an utopian world, because as we saw recently, we had all these increases in food prices. So the immediate reaction from the policymakers would be to see prioritize food for the domestic market rather than for exports. And that is what happened recently in terms of wheat and so on. However, this cannot sustain in the longer term. So you cannot have frequent restrictions on exports and so on. So that thought process is there in the government. In this occasion, recently, it was more of somewhat like an emergency situation. Of course, one can argue that there are enough stocks and one could have avoided it, but it was a difficult situation. So, however, what I would like to say is that there is a need for balancing the export ambition, the export policy, the import dependence or import protection and tariffs and openness, and the domestic capacity development scale, and then a wide range of the external environment within the country, like infrastructure, logistics, and so on. So a lot has been done over time in all these aspects. For example, I'm now living in Delhi after I moved here last year, and for 15 years I was not in Delhi. But 15 years ago, 15, 16 years ago, when I was here, it was very difficult to get coconut water on the roadside, in the market here, particularly the ones coming from the south, because that's the real coconut water. Right? So now I see that everywhere. I go to the road, I see everywhere. Why was it possible? Because of the road infrastructure. So previously, it was not possible, feasible to literally bring the coconuts before they perish. But now it is possible. So just a very small example here, but still this is something that I have observed myself. So I think all these associated infrastructure services and other things should be developed along with developing the capacity, so that we can export more and give effective competition to imports. So I'll look forward to hearing more from the panelists.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Badri. As Mr. Kapil Dev, rightly pointed out, India was always very price sensitive. So maybe the reason could be that India was the policies are more consumer oriented, unlike the developed countries where it is more producer oriented, right? So the sensitivity towards the consumer, because a large section of Indian farmers, 86% of Indian farmers are small and marginal farmers, and majority of them are the net food consumers from the market. So any increase in prices will have an adverse impact on their livelihood. And, so historically, that could be the reason why India was always very sensitive to the consumers. So, but then if we look at the scenario prior to 1990s, that was precisely the reason why the Indian agricultural sector was, criticized for the government intervention, which was biased towards the consumers by neglecting the producers. So, as you pointed out, the scenario has not changed much. Even now, the moment when the price increases, we are actually responding in the same fashion by export ban and other associated measures. And so then coming to the point that Dr. Badri made, the policy initiatives are mainly to boost exports and increase self-sufficiency domestically, so that we don't have to import a lot. So we'll be exporting more. So again, we are coming back to the old age argument that mercantilism, that we export more and import less. So we have not gone much away from that kind of production is increasing through promoting self-sufficiency domestically. What should be the appropriate policies? Because do you think that delinking the prices from the food security policies will be able to better regulate the market prices, delinking the price support MSP from the food security? Because it's kind of like many developing countries like China, Turkey, it's India's food security policies are price support linked. So the delinking, what are the benefits of delinking to regulate the prices domestically, especially when there is this kind of surge in food prices? I would like to hear from Professor Gopinath.
Okay, thank you, Poornima. That's a tough question to answer. But let me begin with acknowledging the fact that across all countries, we face food inflation. Okay, today it is not just India. Okay, and like I told you on the food dollar, if you break it down, the critical input along the entire supply chain is petroleum products. And when the prices of petroleum products went up, everything was affected. Farm production, because that depends on fertilizers. Processing, because that depends on electricity and natural gas. Packaging materials using petroleum products. Wholesale retail trade means you're shipping stuff from one point to another point and so on. So across the board, the prices increased in the input component of each of these processes that led to inflation. Just yesterday, the US numbers came out. Overall inflation is toned down, but food inflation is at the highest level, 13.5%. Okay, and so this is not unique to India. This food price inflation that we are facing, it's common across the countries, both due to petroleum products as well as limited supply of agriculture commodities because of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Okay, so putting that aside, the impact of reforms, as Mr. Dutt would like us to address in this panel. The reform impact is going to be medium to long term, as Dr. Badri talked about. Okay, so do we have short-term solutions to this problem? It's essentially going to be driven by any kind of agreement that we can secure with Russia and US to bring back more supplies into the market, including more supplies of petroleum, because both of them are big exporters of natural gas and petroleum products. So it's a market supply-driven phenomenon. Okay, so I want to acknowledge that part. But coming back to your story about policy changes, I am going to offend a lot of people, but I'm going to say this. The policies that we continue to hold on to are from the 1960s, minimum support prices, buffer stocks, and so on. You're right, they were heavily focused on consumers, meaning we want to maintain low prices for them. But one thing that changed between 1990 versus before and after 1990 was the other way around. And there was this agreement on agriculture for the first time in 7 or 8 rounds in the context of WTO. And more importantly, the manufacturing sector was liberalized much faster than the agriculture sector. And that was the indirect taxation that people were talking about. By raising the terms of trade for manufacturing, we are indirectly taxing agriculture. Okay, that tax has gone away to some extent. Okay, so agriculture has seen terms of trade improvements, but we continue to tie producers and consumers to a single price, which is not the experience in other high-income countries. Okay, again, I'm going to give you the US example. The famous example is this deficiency payment concept. You let farmers sell the commodity in the market at any price that they get. Okay, you have a minimum support price or a reference price, and the government comes in and says, we'll give you the gap between what you got from the market versus what we think is the appropriate price for you given your cost of production. So what that did to the US was consumers were getting quantities at lower prices, okay, whereas producers were getting a higher income, okay? And so this dichotomy allowed consumers to switch away from just buying a lot of food products to buying other products. And that led to income growth, economic growth, and so on, okay? So we continue to hold on to the strong tie between producer and consumer prices. I think innovative approaches are needed to liberate consumer prices from producer prices. So because we spend a lot of our income on food, until that comes down, we can manage some of this food price inflation effects. When you're spending a significant amount of your income on food, any 1% change in that food price inflation is going to affect your budget significantly. Okay, So I will stop there and take comments from Mr. Kapil and Mr. Badri and come back to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree that we need to shift our policy focus, from the traditional approach we have been carrying. Maybe they were perfectly fit when we started talking about food security and protecting consumer. Now we are sitting all-time high production. A year back, we were sitting on the all-time grain stock government was carrying, right? And we actually started exporting sugar, wheat. We are the largest exporter of paddy. So in all the food grains, even in pulses, we become almost self-sufficient. We are now banning the import. So except oilseed, I think we have reached to a state where at least we can make, we are sure that we are incapable and in a position to produce what we need, and maybe little bit surplus if all the factors remain right, like monsoon and other things. Now the focus should be how to create balance. I think, first the sustainability, right? If we want to push India as an export, food export country in the global market, the sustainability is important. We can't say that we will give 10 million ton wheat today and tomorrow we ban the entire wheat, right? This impacts the entire global dynamics of trade. We have seen seaboard hitting upper circuit when India says yes, and maybe seaboard may hitting one more when we say we are scrapping the duty of wheat on wheat import. So I think sustainability becomes very important, but now we have to see how to bring that sustainability and protecting the interest of consumer and producer both. So I give you a few examples, right? In health, we have moved very fast. The government policies are now saying we are giving you insurance, Ayushman Bharat scheme, right? So you are not dependent on the government for your health need. There is a scientific process of insurance which you can rely on, and if it's need, it will come into action and it will give you the money you need, right? Like US market, professor has spoken about, they follow a very closely knitted warrant system, right, for this price deficiency. And farmers are present in all the derivatives market, carrying almost 30 to 40% of open interest. At least if I talk about wheat, the entire Kansas state farmers are hedged on the exchange, and then they look towards the government. So first step is taken by the farmers to protect themselves, and then they look towards the government. That's point number 2. Point number 3 was an example I would like to give, because I have seen that, the weather. India is a very sensitive, we are monsoon driven, and weather events create a lot of problem in productivity and pricing, and of course the realization by the farmers. Maybe a decade back, if any one of us understand that, when there was a weather event, government agencies were going to the field, they were doing the survey, they were coming out to it, estimated loss and compensation was being, given by the state government and central government as appropriate. Now, Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, the weather insurance, is remarkably successful scheme, right? I don't find anywhere, whatever bigger event it is, that government is doing survey and coming to the compensation, because there is a scientific process to manage that risk which can arise out of the weather event, right? I think we have to think about on the prices side as well. Unfortunately, that is mostly dependent. Farmers are dependent either on a APMC, which is a very complex market. Transparency is still questionable. And second is the MSP. And they keep on, dwindling in between two. What is best for us? And the farmers who really not able to, find the right, then the entire nose of, protecting farmers starts. At least, we have to work out on some middle where farmers are themselves taking this call that what price I want for my crop. So maybe, giving them a fixed price through MSP. So giving them a fixed price and talking doubling farmer income, we should talk about, protecting minimum income for the farmers, right? And then whatever extra farmers can make, right? That should be. Just for an example, I'll give you, right? MSP, a few days back, someone make a statement that most of the farmers have sold their material, so MSP at MSP. So if prices fall, farmers are not in loss, right? This is only one side of the thing. There are still 40% farmers who are holding their crop, and if prices falls, they are going to make a loss. And is it necessary to say that farmer will get only MSP? They do not have right over and above MSP. Maybe we need to debate on that as well. So some market linked instruments need to be definitely given. I will connect it with, right. I was attending one of the meeting for rice export, maybe how to promote rice export. And the demand from the industry, and I'm not against the industry, but they demanded it that freight is too high, we need freight subsidy, right? Somebody says the quality parameters, we are now very stringent, the global parameters, so we need subsidy on the testing, on we need some subsidy for the organic farming, so farmer grow organic farming. So everything somehow was going to the government, give us something and we will export, right? But if you do the global market, I think these kind of demands are very very minimal, right? They have a mechanism. If there's a freight is an issue, you can go to the market, you can book your freight through a derivatives market. There is a Baltic index, there is other index. If there's weather related issues, there is a market. You can go and at least try to control bit of risk by using the derivatives market. If the price related issue, you can go to the derivatives market, you can lock your prices. China, right, Chinese insurance company has come up with a product called price insurance, and they are using derivatives market, to rewrite their risk through that, right? So they are saying, farmers, you give us some premium, we will ensure the minimum price for you. If prices are below them, we will compensate you. If it goes up, you are free to go to the market. And I would like to say here that we also did these kind of, along with SEBI, we work with SEBI. SEBI is our regulator. Put options in agri derivatives were launched, and we understood that this is the best product for the farmers, especially when government is definitely looking out to protect their income and giving some kind of support to protect their income. So we did a pilot project where we identified around 50 FPOs, and we asked them to buy put option at the time of sowing. So the people who actually understand put option, it protect you from the falling prices if prices fall. So almost 3,000 farmers through 40 FPOs bought put option when they were making the sowing decisions, right? So I tell you what happens by this, right? First, they were not linked to a price, they were linked to the profitability. They choose one crop out of two options available, which were giving them maximum profit, right? So MSP becomes little out of the question, because now I am not looking at what price I am getting, I am looking what profit I am getting per unit of my land. Then they were evaluating what cost I need to pay to protect that price, right? So they understood the premium is 5%, 4%, 3% for this particular price. They decided that we paid that premium to begin with, we subsidized that premium, and it closed down, right? None of the farmer came to us and say, I got, because the way it got settled, every farmer, it's recorded now with us, was very happy that minimum at the time of sowing itself, we knew what we are going to get. We are not dependent either to the APMC market or on the government. We know our price we have decided, we know our profitability per unit, and probability of opportunity to get higher prices remain with us. Because if market is higher than what prices I have logged, I have no obligation in the options market the way these are designed. So it's a win-win, and the cost is 3-4%. If you compare it, what cost government is putting, in protecting to provide MSP to the farmers, going into the physical, it's huge. A commodity which is at 1,800-1,900 rupees MSP like wheat, economic cost to FCI is around 2,700 rupees, almost 50% higher than MSP. And I'm not talking about here the price loss which they will make if prices are not over and above MSP. So I think we need to look toward these kind of things and integrating every options available. I'm not saying this may be the solution, but it need to be explored now, and things have to be seen in those way. Second, last point, I'm getting a little longer, but this is because this is important. I'm saying on the government intervention in the market, I think in absence of the right information, it creates a lot of problem, right? So the agriculture information system globally has moved, maybe we are at a 50 years back system, right? We know the sowing number, how much sowing has happened. We know the average productivity, and we know the yield. So our S&D is very static, while trade S&D is not static. They keep on changing at every event. How it is, what's happening, what is the impact of high temperature, what is the impact of low rain or high rains at different crop time. at the crop stages. Like in case of wheat, government took it, almost 2 months to conclude that because of high temperature, our yield is down by 10%. Market one knew it maybe 2 months back when this actually event happened, and they started behaving basis what they have that time, and government understood is a little later. And if something happens in between, some price movement happens, that is being questioned. And when prices are being questioned, of course, some abrupt decisions are always there. So we need to create an information system. Globally, if you go, we know the production, we know the consumption, we know the stock to use ratio. Every month, USDA is coming up and telling word, look what we have, what is the beginning stock, what is the ending stock, how much has been consumed, what is the crushing. So by providing this information, if you make a decision, okay, we are putting tariff on the soybean export, there is acceptance to that decisions because it is backed by very, very well defined data. In case of India, I think we are still way behind. We don't have consumption data. We don't know monthly how much we are carrying, how much we are crushing, how much we are consuming, what is the stock to use ratio, what is the stock depletion, so many things which actually the rest of the world follow. So if we create that ecosystem, decisions made by the government can be more acceptable to the entire trade, and these will not be considered disruption. This will be considered a reasonable decisions made for some right reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kapil. Yeah, as you rightly pointed out, it's really important to have a revisit at the MSP as a policy, because even when we look at the percentage of beneficiaries for rice and wheat, I think the NITI Ayog study, I think I'm forgetting the year, couple of years back, they came up with a study saying that around 30% of rice and wheat farmers in India are getting the benefit of MSP. But when it comes to pulses and other crops, it's less than 10%. So, and not only that, we can see that the beneficiaries are mainly from some states, and there is huge interstate variations in terms of the benefit of MSP. And recently, I was just having a look at the interstate movement of goods and looked at the rice, trade that's taking place between the states. And very interestingly, Punjab and Haryana, being the water scarce states in India, was exporting around 90% of the rice to the rest of the states in India, where there is relatively more water availability. So this kind of issues, I mean, not only the markets are getting distorted, even it is creating lots of environmental water imbalances in the country. Because then if you go by the comparative advantage logic, then I mean the state, even with water scarcity, is continuing the cultivation of rice and wheat, mainly because of the MSP, because they have an assured MSP, and even the procurement by the FCI also takes place mainly from the APMCs of these states, and that's the reason why we saw farmers from these states in the forefront of the recent farmers protest. So yeah, no doubt about it. I think we need to have a revisit of the MSP, and we need to see what else can be an alternative mechanism, and the deficiency payments that Professor Gopinath mentioned. But then at the same time, there are many researchers, there are studies that says that this kind of income support given by the governments in the developed countries, in the US or in the Europe, was actually keeping the domestic prices at a lower level, and that's helping them to export at a lower price, at a lower price to the world market. And in a way, isn't it a sort of a dumping? Because in case if your cost is higher than the price at which you are selling the crop, the gap between the price that you're getting and the cost is being covered through deficiency payments, and that's giving you an incentive for you to produce, even though your production may or may not be viable, and you're selling at a lower price in the world market. So that's one thing, but then at the same time, we need to see to what extent similar policies, income support policies, can be, although we have started discussions in that direction, but how feasible inequalities in context, income payment instead of price support. Because when we see the developed countries and developing countries, we know that developed countries are predominantly giving income support, whereas countries like India is mainly giving price support. So this difference in price support mechanism and income support mechanism is also creating, I think, that difference in the manner in which the countries respond to, rise in food prices. Yeah. So I think, I mean, I'm just, kind of asking some of my doubts. Yeah. So we would like to hear more about all this. Dr. Badri?
Yeah. So definitely, MSP is, it has several disadvantages, and we both the panelists and Dr. Poornima, you also have already explained the difficulties there. But of course, the one aspect there is you've already seen how difficult it is to change such policies in a large country like India. So it's politically it's quite challenging. And from a kind of technical or theoretical or economic point of view, I think it's we already all of us agree that the more we get into what we call as decoupled payments, direct payments, income support, maybe crop insurance. We talked about this disasters and so on. So crop insurance. So these are more prudent kind of policies. And the good news is that in the past few years we have been taking some steps there. Even if some of us may think of them as baby steps, some steps have been taken in the direction. Some kind of income transfers, Kisan Bima Yojana kind of stuff, PM Kisan and so on. So I think that is a positive thing, and I think it has to expand over time. And you also rightly pointed out that the beneficiaries of MSP or the producers, rice and wheat producers, are concentrated in a few states. And if we also look at the other states, many of the other states, the recent farm reforms that we talked about, some of them have already been implemented at the state level in many other states. And there is a need for a study which we can conduct to basically understand how these kind of reforms, we can take them one by one, what different states have done and how they have led to increase in farmer prosperity or prices and so on. So that will be a great undertaking that I've been meaning to do for a long time, but some research collaboration can be done there, and that will help the policymakers to develop the political and the policy narrative of that thing. Because once we know that this is something that will definitely work, and we have evidence not in the US or EU, but in India, in some states, that will give a lot of strength to the policymakers to go ahead and take it to the people and implement it. Because now it's more of a perception issue. Like you rightly said, there are only 30%, 40% of the farmers use MSP. So it's not much of a farmers issue itself, it's more of a perception issue. If you look at the recent protests, there are more non-farmers than farmers who are supporting these protests and so on. So I think, and it's not, I'm not in any way kind of blaming anyone, but it's more of a perception issue. So I'm not saying that people are taking advantage of the situation or something, but it's a genuine issue, like where some people think that it's we have to support farmers and this is how it is. So that worldview has to, I wouldn't say change, but the worldview has to be calibrated, adjusted to the reality. What is the reality? What is the information? Like Mr. Kapil pointed out about the information systems. But coming to the information systems, I agree that it's again long pending thing. It has not been done. We have to link these policies. I mean, export bans, restrictions, import tariffs. these are all not absolutely bad, but they have to be used very sparingly in specific situations. And those situations should be calibrated using real data. And that is what I think Mr. Kapil was saying. And I completely agree with that. And again, some beginning is being made in that area. With the Ministry of Agriculture has been working on some projects on that, and even the Department of Commerce. So and some of it is coming from the trade angle. So when you are exporting, let's say spices or some specific, vegetables or fruits, the exporters, the importers have a lot of restrictions. They say they have a lot of standards, SPS, sanitary, phytosanitary standards, and so on. And in order to take those things into account, now there are some information systems being created by the government in collaboration with some private sector partners and so on. So the Department of Commerce during the COVID time, they did develop some blockchain-based systems. And currently with the UN and even we are involved, NITI is also involved in some such development of such systems. So these systems at the moment are meant for tracking and quality and so on. But they very much contain the detailed data also, data on production and distribution and so on. So that can be leveraged, and more of this kind of efforts should be done. And then from there, the analytical connection between that and policy making should be done. I think I'm in complete agreement with that, and it's high time we move in that direction. So and also another aspect I wanted to briefly mention is that if you do some little bit of cross-country comparisons, I think in terms of government expenditure, how much is spent for agriculture, it's only 0.5% in India, and many other countries it's much bigger. So it is not that we are giving a lot of subsidies. It is, but the point that we are making is that the subsidies are actually very low. The amount we are spending on farmers is low, but even that low amount is spent inefficiently. So if we can first keep the budget the same and make the spending more efficient, that will be a big game changer. And then we can slowly also increase it. Secondly, if you look at the share of agriculture, forestry, fishery, the whole primary sector in the total of Indian GDP, it's around 20%. And if you look at the exports of the same sectors, that is only around 15%. Whereas this, so you're producing more as a share of your total value added, but you are exporting much less as a share of total exports. So this is actually quite interesting. And if you look at many other countries, it's totally the other way around. So the production share, the value added share may be like 1 or 2%, but the export share will be like 20-30%. So many other countries, they really get a lot of foreign exchange earnings from the sector, but we are mostly focusing on the domestic market. So that means two things. One thing is we are not producing enough, and second thing is we are not producing enough quality which can be exported, or we're not able to track the quality that can be exported. So these are all some structural issues that we definitely have to consider. And also one point you mentioned, I also quite agree, Dr. Poornima, is about the environmental situation, how it's kind of forced focus on certain crops, not directly conducive or related to the domestic or local climatic, agroclimatic conditions, can lead to depletion of water table and soil fertility because excessive fertilizers, insecticides, and so on. So now again in NITI we have been pushing for natural farming, where we can reduce all this damage to the environment and also have healthy food. So those kind of initiatives should be there. But I'm a little, as an economist, again, I'm a little skeptical about thinking of natural farming and organic farming as being efficient enough to supply everyone. And maybe we have already seen this in the context of Sri Lanka to some extent. So, but having said that, we should definitely encourage those also. Like we can think of a coexistence of natural farmings. At least the consumers have a choice. That okay, if I get something in the market that is organic or natural certified, I should be able to believe in it. So there has to be some system to do that, and that we can keep it market linked. So if there is going to be more demand for it, you're going to supply is going to be created. So people are going to grow more of natural food. But apart from that, we should also at least reduce the excessive use of fertilizers and pesticides and so on, and excessive use of water, electricity, by calibrating the policies accordingly. So if you give free power, for example, or excessive fertilizer subsidies and so on, farmers are going to use whatever is available free because they are desperate. They are facing a lot of challenges. They just take what is freely available in excess, and then that leads to problems. So there we can have some control. Again, this will tie us back with the income transfers kind of solution, which can with which the farmer can decide whether to buy a natural fertilizer or a chemical, how much electricity to consume to pump water out of the ground. So all these things can be taken into consideration. So I think basically I'm in agreement with the panelists, co-panelists, that we have to have a rethink of the policy, because it's not only connected to prices, which is our central point of discussion today, food inflation, but also sustainability, environment, trade, several other things. So it's a very interconnected issue. So if you fix policies on one hand, on just one set of instruments, that can actually lead to so much improvements across the board. So that's my limited perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Badri. Yeah, as you said, the assured, MSP for farmers from northern states, especially from Punjab and Haryana, along with the free electricity. I mean, that's there in throughout the country. So that's also kind of leading to the over exploitation of the groundwater, because they don't have to pay for the groundwater. So the groundwater is getting depleted. So as you said, many of these policies are interconnected, and kind of, I think, we really cannot separate one from the other. And the shift away from price support to income support, I think even in the developed countries like US and Europe, the shift, I think, away from price support to income support happened gradually. I think the first step, I think, that happened in the US around 1960s and then 1980s, and then the major steps were through the Federal Agricultural Improvement Reforms Act of 1996, when the WTO was introduced. So I think I also thought a lot about it, because why can't India also go for an income transfer? And so income transfer along with increase in public investment. As Mr. Kapil, they said many people confuse even the public subsidy as a component of public investment. But then do we need more of public investment or agricultural subsidies? If you see the trend since 1990s, we can see that there has been an increase in agricultural subsidies on the one side, but a decline in the public investment on the other side. Although there has been a tendency to reverse the public investment in mid 2000, even now the amount of public investment is not adequate. As I mentioned, in my note, several East Asian countries, including China, has enormous public investment in the agricultural sector. So if you see China's average farm size is less than India, 0.6 or something like that. But even with such a small farm size, the crop yield is much higher as compared to India. So as per many studies, it is mainly due to the amount of public investment that is taking place in the agricultural sector. So my apprehension is, if we move away from price support to income support, and make the income transfer to the farmers, how do we address the issue of the low productivity? Because the productivity issue is still, I think, continuing in the Indian agricultural sector, right? So now if you give money to the farmer and asking him or her to buy the fertilizer at the market price, then there is a possibility that the farmer may not be applying even the sufficient quantities of fertilizer for the production. So if there is no such incentive to invest in the land, there is a possibility in a country like India to divert that payment for non-productive purposes. So eventually, how would that contribute to the improvement in the agricultural productivity? But for developed countries, probably that may not be a concern because they have already attained high levels of productivity. So what are your thoughts? Yeah, thank you.
Good questions again, Dr. Poornima. I want to address the previous issue that you talked about. As we transition to move to an income support regime, it is not just the government. There are a variety of other instruments that go along with it. And in the case of US, for example, the crop insurance program was introduced in early 80s, and there was no pickup until late 1990s. So the transition even here takes a very long time. The derivatives market, crop diversification away from staples. There are many different ways that the income support story can evolve in the Indian context. So I completely agree with my panelists that it is not just a policy-driven story. Okay. So with regard to your second question, please remind me again. Your second question was about how can we maintain the incentives? How can we maintain the incentives of productivity, right? So two things are going to happen in my guess. One, we invest in productivity that the income support isn't enough for them to survive. Like it just gives them the average income that if you really want to make more money, you have to be motivated to work in the farm. If not, you are going to realize losses, which would allow for structural transformation. That is, the land from people who are not being productive would be transferred to people who are more productive. Okay, some people won't like that, but I think that is the transformation that has happened in other countries. That people that are not interested in farming, who are not making profits. This is common in the manufacturing sector. If a company is not making profits, it dies, right? So some kind of transformation will happen in that particular context, okay? But to really sustain them, if you really care about keeping them in farming and keep them moving forward, investments in technology is critical, as other co-panelists have talked about. And I think there's this huge mistake about counting subsidies as investments in agriculture. The real investments are going to be in the context of research and development, in the context of infrastructure, and also in the context of data collection that both of my co-panelists talked about. As I reviewed the studies on the APMC Act and their impacts, there's some good examples from Karnataka, there's some good studies on Bihar, but almost all the states have done some reform. There is not enough data to understand what is the impact of these reforms. Okay, so not only R&D, not only infrastructure, but also the information ecosystem that we talked about needs to be built in to make this whole system be more efficient. So that's my initial thinking on that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any other views? Mr. Kapil?
No, I think I'm in agreement with what Professor has said. It's not only one thing which needs to be done. I think so many things, but I think this government is really structurally focusing all these aspects. Change in agri is a very, very slow process, right? Even shifting from a normal seed to hybrid seed took us 10 years. Despite knowing BT acceptance, we have seen how it happens. So it's a slow process, but we have to make sure that everything what is needed to bring the change after 10 years is in place right now. And I think government is doing that. this FPO, which government is pushing now, it's a huge step. We have seen cooperative farming, individual farming now. FPO is kind of corporate farming. We talks about maybe what professor has said. It let the people who want it to do let them do the agree. And FPO is not actually that, but it's bringing so many people together. So they are their bargaining power is high. They can use technology much more efficiently. The size and scale is improved. So that part is being done. On the infrastructure side, AIF is really bringing change. And maybe after 5 years, we will not be talking about having any infrastructure issue in India as far as the grain storage is concerned. Third is about creating visibility about the output. The focus on electronic negotiable warehouse receipt. I think it's a long awaited, which is government has started thinking now. In the US, you need to go to the market and buy the grains. You go to any of the facilities of Cargill, you just click the button and you get in your account. I think we are going into that. And once we say ENWR, it's not only about transactional purpose. It is graded, it is sampled, the results is there. There is a perfect audit trail, traceability is there. You have the transaction records. So a lot of transparency also comes, and government really, I think, very serious about making this ecosystem very strong. And third is about putting a lot of money on the input side. I think the growth which we have seen in Indian agri is driven by the input side. The productivity has increased definitely multiple times. I mean, the CAGR must be very handsome. I don't have hand-on data on that. But yes, we are now seeing most of the crops, especially few states have really done remarkably well. Agri startups and agri techs who are coming, they are providing a lot of facilities to improve these inefficiencies, like the AI-based soil testing technique, which is there, AI-based quality technique, which is there, and maybe alignment of fertilizer use and other treatment will come in place slowly and gradually, I think. So once all these things are plugged in, I think after 10 years, we will be in a different situation when we talk agri. But yes, as I said earlier, on the marketing side, I think a lot need to be done at this point of time, because if prices, if the producer is not having confidence on the price which they are going to get after putting a lot of efforts, efforts will not be that serious what it should be. So I think we definitely looks toward work more on the output marketing side, and how we can bring a lot more changes the way price discoveries are happening, price information is available, and actual transactions are happening.
Thank you, Mr. Kapil Dev. Would you like to share some views, Dr. Badri?
Yeah, absolutely. Any transition to your first question about MSP to income transfer, transition. So any transition is going to take a lot of time, and in general, but now we are talking about agriculture, which has been used to certain systems for several decades. So of course, it has to happen in phases. And what I feel, based on all the policies that government is pursuing, is that we are already in the process of that phasing. So we already began some of that process, income transfer and so on. And it's going to be a continuous work in progress. And on the second aspect, yes, obviously just giving them some income support is not going to solve the issue. So we have to have, like both esteemed co-panelists mentioned, spend on research, infrastructure, and so on. And it's also like this whole thing has to be thought of as a business opportunity by the industry, and that, like Mr. Kapil pointed out, agri-tech companies are becoming more and more profitable. What I hear is that getting a lot of funding, they're able to recruit people just like any other tech company. So it means that there is enough appetite in the market, in the business also, to take up all these solutions. So I think that is already a very mature kind of situation, because you see the market working on its own, pouring a lot of millions of dollars, only if the whole ecosystem has developed to that extent. I think that is there. One last point I would like to add is that in addition to spending on research and innovation and so on, we should also look into, instead of reinventing the wheels, we should also look into adopting the best practices from the rest of the world. So from the government's point of view, we have been interacting with many other governments like Israel, European countries and so on. And many of them are willing to share state-of-the-art technologies that they have developed with us. And a lot of collaborative labs are being created in our excellent infrastructure we have in our agricultural universities. They are collaborating with many of these international counterparts. So I think these efforts should also continue because many times the solutions are already there elsewhere. It's just a matter of bringing it here, scaling up, and implementing. So I think combination of both. I mean, of course, we have to aspire for excellence in research and innovation, and but a lot of questions that we are facing, the pressing questions that our farmers are facing, have already been solved globally in other places. So it's good to adopt those best practices and implement here. So I think all these things, if they're done together with the other things that the government can do, then it can work. So it's a work that has to be done in collaboration. The industry, the farmers, the people at large, government, so on. So everyone has a role to play in this.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Badri. Yeah, I mean, technology adoption, especially the sustainable agricultural practices, to reduce the usage of several inputs, water and fertilizer. I think all this should go side by side along with other reforms. And yeah, thank you so much. I think we can take questions from the participants. Yeah.
Kundan has a question broadly. While the importance of derivatives market is important, do you think that in India, where the agricultural spot markets aren't working properly, can we really leapfrog farmers into derivatives? Can small farmers get into derivatives market? And his second is price information is important, but we don't have facilities like warehouses, cold storages, ease of transportation at our markets. Even if one knows prices in different markets, what is the use? How this can be solved? So, Dr. Badri, would you like to take this?
So, I think I would leave the derivatives question to Mr. Kapil. I think he's the expert on it. And on the second question, price information, facilities. Yeah, again, the infrastructure is again a continuous process, and definitely a lot of investments are needed. Government can play a dual role. One is like what we have done in the past in terms of FCI, invest in some of these aspects. You're talking about warehouses, cold storages, and so on, ease of transportation, and so on. So, and some of them has to be taken up by the private sector. And I think that is where we need some partnership. And the government also have we have to like some of the good work that has been done in the past on infrastructure. I was talking about road infrastructure, for example, that is already showing its benefits in the market already, the market. But more of that has to be done, and definitely there are still logistical constraints, and all the points that Mr. Kundan has pointed out are true, and we have to fix all of them. So it's not like once you have information, all the problems are solved. So information is one key element there, but you also have to solve all the pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah. So I will take the second first. I'll just add what Mr. Dr. Badri has said. I don't think warehousing is an issue now in India, right? If you see the the organized warehouse space we have for grains, the utilization, annual utilization percentage is only 60%. So it means I think we have now somehow reached to a level where we have sufficient warehouse space, and it is a known fact that India, in absence of formalized warehouse infrastructure, have created its own small warehouse infrastructure at farm levels, in the houses, in the shops, right? So the point is that how to use that infrastructure which we have built. First, how to upgrade it. I think country with 350 million ton of grains cannot afford the flat storage now. Means the entire world has moved to silo and automated operations and automated post-harvest management. Second, how to use these information available with different warehouses in developing a portal. What I know that government internally have those informations available. I think we need to now look forward how these information are made public for public consumption. I give you one example. In exchange ecosystem, we use ENWR, and we deliver almost maybe close to 100,000 MT of goods per month in a normal month using derivatives market. And at any point of time, we have close to 1 million ton stock in a good time. And every day, what is moving in, what is moving out, which warehouse has what is the quality, everything is available on every day. It is updated on the everyday basis, right? I think these informations are not available anywhere, but it is just because we have adopted ENWR, negotiable receipt mechanism. We have a repository to handle all this data. We have made it now possible that whatever is happened. So 12 million, 15 million, close to 13 million we have now delivered using derivatives market, and we can tell you even any transaction, when it happened, who bought, who sold, what quality it was, what grade of FSSAI or egg market belong to. So I think infrastructure we have. I really now don't say this that we don't have infrastructure. We have that. We just need to create some connect to use the information available and taking it to the public. Coming to the point number one, which belongs to me, is about derivative market. I think derivative market bridge that gap. If there is absence of a spot market, derivative markets provide you a national market which always you can connect with your local spot market. So there are a spot market in India, but I think the question is how transparent they are, how much connected they are with each other, how they follow each other, and derivatives market connect all these dots. With our experience, I tell you the maximum participation of FPOs we see it's from Bihar, where there is no spot market at all. There is no APMC, it's a free market. And almost now 18 states we have seen FPOs are participating. There are few FPOs who are participating purely for financial hedging. They are not coming to exchange, depositing goods, delivering their goods. They are using it for the price risk management, and they are using their own spot market to handle the physical side of the business. So I think it is doable. We do not need presence, warehouse presence or spot market everywhere to have the derivatives market, but we need the very good connect and maybe the understanding of the market by the FPOs, how they can use that. So awareness is something which I think is much more important than where we are present at this time.
Yeah. There's a question by Mukesh Prohit. What all steps can be taken to take situations of flood and drought in consideration, as Indian storage of goods at present is less than a year, and the minimum food storage should be less than 2 years, as to which government stopped the exports, but the major revenue gets affected. What alternative can be expected?
So is it related to, I think, storage practices when we have the floods and we see goods getting impacted?
Yeah, what should be the minimum food storage quantity that India should have, considering both flood and drought?
I think India has a very well-defined, scientifically defined buffer norms, right, for wheat at different part of years, looking at the seasonality, monsoon, what we should have, right? Yesterday only we all were talking India have 27.5 million ton of wheat, which is very close to what buffer norms are there. So I think for a general business, normal year, everything has been taken into consideration and buffer norms have been defined. Now the question is that what we have, how to store it properly. So I think that how to protect the grain which we are storing. I think government is putting a lot of focus on that. They are converting their storage into silo. They are talking about steel silos in many of the states. Few class infrastructure already has been built by the FCI. The total loss which FCI used to make maybe a few years back has gone down. I think what I understand, there are a lot of efficiencies there. So, and if you see the storage life of the grains, which Indian is, yes, it may not be at par with the global standard, but if you see what FCI is doing, what private trade is doing, roughly around 1 year grain storage is very fine. Means I think it's it's at par with the global benchmark. Agriculture commodities are seasonal in nature. After every year you have the commodities, so you may need not to actually carry the same good. You can always replace it if cost allow you to do that. So you need not to carry it for 2-3 years, but I think things are very much improving at the ground, and hopefully we will quickly move to silos and the automated handling in the warehouses space.
Yeah. So I think other questions have been answered. No, I have one last question. So, no, FPOs have been coming in a lot, in India, and there's a huge push to support FPOs. And if I see the structure of FPOs, they are like a collective of farmers which would be negotiating, which would be able to go to a bank, which would get a loan and give a kind of corporate structure to farmers. So now, Kapil, can you highlight what is the current status? Has that the expectation of FPOs to reach a level in terms of corporate governance, in terms of capability building, is it working? What has to be done for that?
I think FPO is a good initiative. We have to understand that FPO, whether they are in a corporate structure, are still managed by the farmers itself. So it will take a lot of time for them to understand what is there, how to run it in a very, corporate structure and things associated. But the good part is that the support being given by the government, by the financial institutes is improving. I'm not saying it is what it should be, but the focus is now very, very much on these aspects. What we understand as an exchange, when we started this FPO drive, we only had 5 FPOs to begin with to trade in FPOs. Now we have almost 500 FPOs, with us trading derivatives, trading even the options, which is a very complex financial tool, taking delivery from the exchange, doing financial hedging. And that is, I think, leading many other FPOs to come. So I think out of 10,000 FPOs we have, there will be certain FPOs who will not make their way, and they will not achieve what we think. But I personally don't think, if for any reason, when we talk about the farming, we don't need to go to every farmer and educate them. We need not to change everything. We just need to set some very good example and take those examples to larger audience, and farmers are really smart to adopt what they want and what they do not want. So those certain good examples are definitely there, and I think we'll have enough number in coming years.
Thank you so much. That was indeed a wonderful session. Thanks to all the panelists. And we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule for this session. And thanks a lot.
Thanks to all participants for joining. Thank you.
Thank you for organizing it. It's a very lively session. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
everyone. Have a good day.